Up next, Dr. Thorne's Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show on KLZ 560 AM.
Have you heard the news? Dr. Thorne's Medicine Show has arrived. Don't worry, get up close. Dr. Thorne doesn't promise to cure you, but he sure will make you feel better. Now, without further ado, Dr. Thorne.
Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show episode number 116. 116 of millions. You know, if I did the math, Doctor's Assistant Charlie, I would, how many years would I have to be around to do a million shows? I could do 10 a day for the rest of my life, and I'd only get to about 100,000. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just delighted that I am here in the studio on this glorious fall day in the foothills of the Colorado Rockies, and I'm delighted that you have tuned in. Hope you'll stick with me. I want to revisit just briefly, once again, the fundraising effort that KLZ did in conjunction with Save the Children on Tuesday, I believe it was. And if you didn't tune in yesterday or you haven't heard the reports on one of the other shows, the collective efforts of the listeners from KLZ, donations in the amount of about more than $3,800 to date. We're still getting some additional details from Save the Children, but let's just call it $4,000 for the sake of my math skills. Based on the one-day only 10 times multiple that was going to be a match by an unnamed donor, KLZ listeners raised nearly $40,000 in support of children with severe acute malnutrition in the Horn of Africa. And I just want to thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You know, we have so many opportunities to share our blessings and share our wealth with others that we have to be judicious. We have to be deliberate. We have to be intentional about where we spend our money and how we share our wealth if we choose to do so. And I am delighted that some of you, including myself, who made a pledge at 11:55 p.m. In fact, I was laughing at myself. I had planned to do the pledge, and like somebody said on the show during the primetime part, if you get distracted, if you don't do it when you're thinking about it, you're liable to, get distracted and life gets in the way, and then you don't get the donation made. And sure enough, I was listening to my own show on the encore performance at 11 p.m. and I was so convincing with the assistance of Scott Wilder from Save the Children that I convinced myself that I should make a donation. So I called in at 11:55, and sure enough, the phone line, the one-day only dedicated phone line for donations on the 10x multiple, was still operational, and a nice lady there assured me that I would get the 10 times multiple. And I don't believe in telling what donation amounts are from donor to donor. Every donation, no matter what the amount, be it 10,000 or a single dollar bill, is honorable and worthy and deserves respect. And so, lest we compare ourselves to each other, I do have to give a shout out to Robert from, I want to say Longmont. Was it Robert from Fort Collins? Charlie, Doctor's Assistant Charlie, was not here. The first guy, I want to give kudos to the first guy that called in during my live show, episode number 114, when Scott Wilder with Save the Children was on. Robert, and I can't remember, I want to say from Fort Collins, because I think it was David from Longmont that called in later with a double down on Robert's amount. But we sort of banged around on Robert a little bit, but I want to thank him. The first one to call always makes a difference. You know, there's a sort of a breakout when somebody calls and says, I believe in this is a worthy cause and I've made a donation. And so, Robert, I don't want to minimize your gift, your donation in any way, and any way, shape, manner, fashion, or form. And so I want to give credit where credit is due to the first one who called the show and made a donation, and that I'm sure prompted others to give serious consideration doing likewise. And before my show was over, we had some real momentum going that carried over into the following show, the Rush to Reason show. And as I was driving back to the Fortress of Solitude in Golden City, I was listening to the Rush to Reason show, as I generally do since it follows my show, and I heard John Rush basically saying that he was going to win the competition for how much in the way of donations was contributed on his show. And I just want you to understand, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, just like David calling in and doubling down on Robert's donation, we're guys. We can make a competition out of standing around waiting to pick up a bus. I mean, it's if you don't have anything else to do, you can pitch pennies against a wall. And guys just, I think we're almost hardwired to have to compete about one thing or another almost all the time. And so in answer to John Rush's challenge that he was going to elicit the most donations during his show, I just want to point out that he has 4 hours on his show in comparison to my one. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I want the record to reflect that I started the momentum. Actually, Scott Wilder started the momentum, and with the generosity of KLZ listeners, that momentum carried over into John Rush's show. And I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that I had several people tell me after the fact that they did not make the donation during the time frame of my show. They made their donation later in the day. So as we closely scrutinize the donation details that we get from Save the Children, I will challenge John Rush's tally. We're going to let John take the best hour. I'll give him the liberty to pick the best hour of his 4, and we'll compare it to my hour, and then we'll see which one of us had the blessing of the listeners that called in with the most donations. All kidding aside, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for your gifts, your donations to Save the Children. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, although the 10 times multiple of your donation was good for one day only, there is still an unnamed donor who will match your donation. So do not hesitate to go to the Save the Children website and consider a donation to a very worthy cause. And know that the life you save of a child in the Horn of Africa, be it in Niger, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Somalia, any of those other countries on the eastern side of the African continent below the Sahara Desert, you just don't know that the life you save might become a leader of his people to help lead them out of that third world status. You don't know what good you do. The life you save might be a child who doesn't become a leader of his people, but simply becomes a leader of his family. And, the radical Islamist Boko Haram that are dominant in that part of the world are a threat to liberty everywhere, because it is not a movement of liberty and freedom of thought, freedom of conscience. It is a totalitarian theocracy. And so as donations are made and as people are ministered to at the point of their greatest need, literally a child, an infant child on death's doorstep, our quiet testimony about the love of the God that I serve unabashedly. I don't make any apology for being a Christian. And that is not a blind leap of someone who merely clings to his gun and his Bible, or should I say guns, Doctor's Assistant Charlie. Do I disclose that I have multiple weapons? Well, that cat's out of the bag. But the thing that I'm trying to emphasize here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, when the Jesus Christ, as told in the Bible, was asked, what is the greatest commandment, by a teacher of the law who in that day would have been very analogous to a modern day lawyer, an expert in the law, he answered, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. And the second is like it." And he wasn't asked about the 2 greatest commandments, I want to point out. As a lawyer myself of 37 years, I find it very interesting that Christ is said to have gone on in what is related in the Bible in Matthew and I believe Mark, in 2 different places. Essentially the same story is told. In Mark, it's in Mark chapter 12, verses 28 and following. Matthew, I believe, chapter 20, if I'm not mistaken. But be that as it may, he answered, "Love the Lord your God with everything you are, your entire being, just totally sold out, And then he goes on and he says, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. When you cannot go to the Horn of Africa yourself, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, but you can entrust your money to a reputable organization like Save the Children, highly efficient, incredibly capable, that intervention at the point of a family's greatest need when an infant child is literally about to die is a great testimony to the love that Christ called upon us to do, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so I leave you with that thought, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I'm going to turn to another subject matter after this brief timeout. And so please stick with me through this break. At the request of a single listener who responded on my Monday show when I gave the rundown on what was going to happen on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, I did not have plans for today's show, and a single listener called and made a request that I talk more about marriage and divorce in America. It is not a subject matter that I enjoy talking about, but I suppose I've become an expert in it. And so when I come back, I'll share some more thoughts with you about that. Please stay tuned. You're listening to the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show on KLZ.
Roll lights are fading. Horizon is burning. Another day is sparkling. On my new truck, we got the
This is a public service announcement. It has come to our attention that Dr. Thorne will tell you that he has the cure for what ails you. But how can he possibly know what ails you? He's on the radio. He cannot see you, much less know what ails you. And even if he could see you, he is on the radio and he cannot hear you, smell you, touch you, or otherwise assess what ails you, much less identify a cure for what ails you. So as much as we all want Dr. Thorne to be successful with his show, we at KLZ 560 AM and Crawford Broadcasting in no way warrant or endorse Dr. Thorne's products or services. It is our solemn duty to give you fair warning about Dr. Thorne. Caveat emptor. Oh, sorry, that's Latin, a dead language, for let the buyer beware. This has been a public service announcement. We return you now to Dr. Thorne's Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You are listening to Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show on KLZ, simulcasting on 560 AM, 100.7 FM, and live streaming at klzradio.com. I just have to give a shout out to a fellow that I met quite by chance, although I must say, as I've said before on previous episodes of the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show, at my age, I have come to believe, I no longer believe in coincidental contact. But I met this fellow named Bob, and it turns out he noticed that the hat that I was wearing, which represents and gives honor to the ballistic or the guided missile submarine that my oldest son serves on, the USS Ohio, and he noticed that and inquired and thanked me for my son's service and asked me to pass that on along to him. And then he revealed that his son was an Air Force guy just about to get out after 20 years of service. And I won't give the details of his service, but I will tell you that it was an extraordinarily high level of service and flying specific missions that I will not repeat. But it's very interesting to me that it seems that almost everywhere I go with that hat on, somebody has got a family member who is either in the Navy like my son or is in some branch of the military. But to Bob and his son, who served a couple of tours and many specific missions that I will not reiterate, thank you for your service. And the same goes to one and all U.S. military veterans and active duty personnel and their families who are here while they sacrifice their time, energy, and talents in defense of our great nation. As I turn back to the subject matter of marriage and divorce in America, I want to begin by reiterating that this is not a subject matter that I would choose. It is a deeply personal thing for many people because although marriage obviously is a time of celebration and almost universally joy and great expectations and happiness, Divorce, on the other hand, is almost universally a time of sadness, an experience of loss and sorrow. And so I will start by saying I want you to visualize, ladies and gentlemen, you may have heard of the infamous bell curve. If you are not familiar with it, if you saw a bell like our Liberty Bell in profile, and you got your crayons out and you drew around the edge of the bell, you would have a shallow slope on the left that ascends steeply and goes up and over and back down on the right to a shallow slope off to the right. I'm talking about bell curve people. So on one side of that bell curve, when we're talking about divorce, there are some people for whom divorce is no big deal. They simply are not invested enough by way of commitment or principle or, other attributes to feel a sense of loss or to feel that anything major has happened. On the other side of that bell curve, divorce is an experience of devastating proportions in which it is a life-changing, crippling event from which they never recover. God forbid that you should be on either side of that bell curve. Both in their own way are a horrific place to be. Marriage, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is an institution that until about 1970 or so was respected and protected in American law. It no longer is. The reason for that is simple, although it's not easy to explain, but the historical facts are indisputable. A small group of people who knew exactly what they were doing worked with success beyond their wildest imagination to change what was, up until the late 1960s in every single state in the United States, a fault-based regime for divorce, in which a marriage to be ended, the legal status accorded to marriage by the state, in order for that to be determined ended and declared as such, required a proof, an evidentiary presentation of facts to show that there was fault on the part of the party from whom the divorce was sought. Beginning in the late 1960s and accelerating through the 1970s, this abomination that causes desolation known as no-fault divorce, this horrific fraud upon the American people, foisted upon the American people by knowledgeable people, a small select group who knew exactly what they were doing, accompanied by a bunch of what Lenin used to refer to as a bunch of useful idiots, succeeded in presenting to the American people a model marriage and divorce act ostensibly designed to make divorce kindler and gentler, without the acrimony and the time and the cost and expense of a fault-based divorce. What that really was an abandonment of the rule of law in the American system of justice, because as I've described on previous episodes of the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine show, because of our history with King George III at the time of American independence, all you have to do to understand the divine right of kings and the power that King George and other monarchs in Europe had is read our Declaration of Independence. And as we begin with almost an apology at the beginning by saying we don't want to rebel, we don't want to revolt, we don't want to declare independence, we would prefer to remain loyal subjects of the King of England and the British Empire. But because of repeated offenses against our dignity and our autonomy and our liberty, we find it necessary to list those offenses so that an inquiring world will understand why we were doing what we were doing. So please forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for a poor paraphrase of the elegance and the eloquence of the Declaration of Independence, but that is how it begins. It begins by saying, here are all the many offenses that King George has done upon us, and he has repeatedly ignored our appeals for mercy, our appeals, our entreaties for different treatment, and because of these repeated offenses over a lengthy period of time, the concluding part of the Declaration of Independence is exactly that. It is, after a summation, a litany of audacious abuses of power by King George III, then the 13 colonies and the signatories who represented them then declare independence from the king and crown and the British Empire. In the same way, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that repeated offenses by King George are reflected in the Declaration of Independence, for many years the rule of law in the American system of justice reflected that power, judicial power in particular, cannot be exercised against a citizen of the United States or any of the states thereof without first an evidentiary proof of a harm, fault, or breach by that citizen. That is properly understood as the rule of law in the American system of justice. We did so that the law functions in a remedial nature to make whole someone who has been harmed by the harm, fault, or breach of the offender, from whom legal recourse is expected. And I say that as an attorney of 37 years and a student of history. I mean, I won't reiterate some of my early childhood things, but my father was an educator and believed in teaching children to read, and most especially his own. And I wrote essays for the Daughters of the American Revolution, and I think somewhere in my boxes of memorabilia somewhere that I acquired when my parents, the last of my two parents, passed on, and we cleared out the house that they had lived in for 52 years. Somewhere I've got 3 little DAR ribbons, and what I hope to find, if I ever uncover those, if I ever get around to going through those boxes to locate such things that are dear to me, I hope that the essays themselves are in there. I rather doubt that they will be, but I think it would be fascinating to read what I wrote as a middle school boy. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what you must understand about marriage and divorce in America is that no-fault divorce is an absolute abandonment of the rule of law in the American system of justice, because there is no evidence required of a harm, fault, or breach by an offending spouse for the other spouse to have a no accountability walk-away opportunity. And as I've said before, I don't suppose from a logical perspective I can begrudge 2 married spouses who both agree that the time has come to end their marriage and that they agree that termination of the marriage is appropriate under their circumstances. What I'm focused upon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is when unilateral divorce on demand is the standard in this country, where one spouse can walk away without any accountability, explanation, or communication about the basis for ending the marriage. That is a manifestly unjust system. And I want to finish this segment, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, by telling you that if you or a loved one or a dear friend or a coworker have suffered a divorce in this country and it was a no-fault divorce, you have been scammed in the worst possible way by a system that plunders literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people every year, and has done so from around the mid-'70s, late 1970s to date. And so, as I've reiterated, or as I've described in previous episodes of the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show, please understand, as I talk about this subject matter, it is not only deeply personal to me, but to many, many people within the sound of my voice, people who are dealing with divorce either from their parents, and they are children of divorced parents, or they are divorced themselves, or a grandparent who has a son or daughter involved in divorce. The children, the parents, the grandparents, all concerned have suffered loss, and our society in the aggregate has suffered an incredible loss. The math is actually frightening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. For about 40 years, we've had about 1 million divorces per year. You multiply that times the 2 spouses, and coincidentally affecting about 1 million minor children each year. And right there, with 80 million parents and 40 million children, you have 120 million people directly affected by no-fault divorce in this great nation. The societal pathologies that we are seeing erupting in all facets of things measurable, dropout rates, drug use, juvenile delinquency, juvenile sexuality, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so as I talk about this subject in a little more detail after this break, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, know that there are hurting people all around you. And I try to approach this subject with some sensitivity out of respect for that incredible loss that our nation has suffered under this horrific hoax of no-fault divorce. I'll be back to tell you more about it after this brief timeout. You're listening to the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show on KLZ.
Horizon is burning, not a day is sparkling. On my new blue truck, we got the rain together. We slide through the mist, waiting for the sun. Me and my new blue truck.
We interrupt this broadcast of Dr. Thorne's Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show for this special public service announcement. We have received communications from many persons claiming to know Dr. Thorne. So many, in fact, we cannot relay all of them to you verbatim. But we can give you the recurring theme of these messages. Use extreme caution when listening to Dr. Thorne's Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show. A little goes a long way. Some, but not all, of the reported side effects include clear and logical thinking, the ability to make sense of current events, and strategic and tactical citizenship. This has been a special public service announcement. And now back to Dr. Thorne's Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You can tune in to live performances of the Dr. Thorne Traveling Emporium and Medicine Show 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time for an hour. If that doesn't work for you, you can hear a rebroadcast of a previously recorded live show 6 nights a week, Monday through Saturday at 11 p.m. Mountain Time for an hour. So if you're a hoot owl, you can pick it up from 11 to midnight, 6 nights a week. And if you can catch it during the day, that's available to you. And promise, dear listeners, as my website comes together, and it won't be too much longer before I have the opportunity for you to be able to listen to either a podcast or go to another platform and listen to previously recorded shows at your leisure. And I look forward to having that available to you as soon as I can possibly make that happen. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the reason I got started on this whole subject matter of marriage and divorce, as I said, deeply personal to me from my own personal experience, and my heart goes out to the literally millions of people who, in one way or another, have dealt with divorce or dealing with divorce, or hopefully an intact marriage that is healthy, will recognize that the greatest threat to a healthy marriage in this society is that divorce has become normalized. It has become standard operating procedure, and serial monogamy has become a phenomenon that is no longer noteworthy in our society, where instead of, like my parents, who I do not hold up as paragons of virtue, they were married for 62 years and without sharing too much in the way of family secrets. I remember we had a central heating and air conditioning system that, as I lay in my bedroom at night, you could hear every word spoken almost anywhere in the house through the ductwork. And I remember them fighting like cats and dogs, but, you know, they managed to get through some rough patches, and they managed to get through some things that in a modern context would have immediately ended in divorce. They managed to stick it out for 62 years. And in the end, like many couples, the social sciences data is pretty well documented. It's, in fact, almost to the point it's not even refutable, that marriage is not a bed of roses. Anybody who tells you that it is, is trying to blow smoke up your skirt. But I will say that marriage as an institution within which to grow as an individual and to grow and rear children is far superior to any other modality that social sciences can conjure up. And we've seen a radical departure, a radical escape from the biological family being the greatest influence for the life of a child. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I hope this has been helpful to you. And I hope that if you know someone or you yourself are dealing with divorce, that you will benefit from a deeper understanding of what's happened to you, me, and all of us in our society. God bless you.